Hey guys, A&A here. Coasters are composed of their elements, which deliver forces to your body. That includes positive g-forces, negative g-forces, and lateral forces. But those forces can vary depending on where you are seated. And so, you might be asking, if I want to ride a coaster and have the best possible ride experience, what row should I sit in? The front row? The back row? Heck, even the middle? Well, that's the question I'm here to answer, so let's jump right in. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a definitive answer to the question. The best row on a coaster heavily depends on what kind of ride experience you want. The front row, the back row, and the middle rows all have their pros and cons. And it also depends on how long the trains are in the coaster, whether it be 2 rows or 15. It also depends on where you are positioned on the train, whether you're on the leftmost or rightmost seat. And one more unrelated thing before I begin. Thank you all so much for 100 subscribers. Everyone has been so supportive and I appreciate all of you. And the fact that this milestone was reached in less than a year is amazing. So yeah, thank you all so much. Alright, enough blabber, let's start with the pros and cons of the front row. To most of the general public, the front row is the best seat. And that is where the first con lies. The front row will usually have a longer wait than the others. But this doesn't affect the ride experience, so this is a minor flaw. But it is still a notable downside. But a major pro for the front is the unobstructed view. This can make it so you can better appreciate theming, like on Velocicoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure in Orlando, Florida. The first half is chock full of near misses with the Raptors and has extensive rock work. But it's harder to appreciate the theming in the middle and the back rows, as it's harder to see with the front rows blocking the view. Another pro for the front row is the wind in your face. This might not be as impactful to others, but there's just something real special about the sheer speed and power of it. In specific coasters that go extremely fast, like King Dakar at Six Flags Great Adventure, and especially Formula Rossa at Ferrari World in Abu Dhabi, which, might I add, is the world's fastest coaster, will forcibly pull your cheeks back from the sheer acceleration and speed. And to ride Formula Rossa, you literally need to wear goggles to protect your eyes, it's that fast. And speaking of speed, the front row comes with an amazing sense of speed. You can really appreciate how fast you are traveling up front, especially on rides that focus on speed. Examples of this are Millennium Force at Cedar Point, Sky Rush at Hershey Park, and Intimidator 305 at King's Dominion. These coasters display their power and speed, and are one of their strong points that you can only really appreciate in the front row. And my last pro for the front row is that the forces can sometimes be better in the front. For example, double-up elements are usually better in the front, as those rows are traveling faster into the initial pop than the back. And on some inversions, the front gets an initial snap or burst of positives entering the element that is more pronounced than the back rows. But unfortunately, this is very specific to some elements. Even so, it still seems like the front might just be the best row. But let's give the others a chance, shall we? Ah yes, the back row. As a coaster enthusiast, my favorite row, in general, has always been the back. And it is well known in the coaster community that the back row usually has stronger forces. And this is true. For an example, I recorded the G-forces of Silver Bullet at Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California. I recorded it both in the back and front rows to compare. The difference isn't by much, but it's still enough that you can distinctly feel the more intense row. While the front pulls a maximum of 4.45 positive Gs, the back pulls a whopping 4.6 Gs. This is because on most elements, the back row gets dragged by the front through a coaster's elements, as the front rows are traveling faster while the back is still in the element. This is seen best on the traditional B&M Camelback. The front gets weaker airtime going in, while the back gets a stronger pop coming out of it. But one con the back has is that some coasters are rougher in the back. This is often seen on wooden coasters. And this is unrelated to rows, but sitting on a wheel seat can also be rougher. But I digress. Even some steel coasters are rougher in the back. On some B&M Hypers, especially the ones with staggered seating, the back row has a pretty nasty rattle according to most riders. While you do get more whip over the drops, the trains are less maneuverable and the back rows have a worse rattle. But still, the roughness most of the time is worth it for the better forces and airtime. One other con for the back is that on some coasters, there are too few rows for there to be a significant difference row to row, so the front is a clear choice. This is especially noticeable on Gerstlauer's Infinity or Eurofighter trains with only 2 rows. But there are still a few pros left for the back, so don't count it out just yet. One of the other pros I have for the back row is that they usually have a shorter wait. Except if you're at an enthusiast event, the general public will either go to the front row, the middle rows, or where they're told by the ride attendant. Most think that the back is the worst row in a coaster, But you can exploit this, as while they have to wait for the front, you can stroll right into the back and get the strongest possible forces on the ride. And this last pro is for the socially awkward people out there. When you sit in the back, no one is behind you to look at your back while you ride. This doesn't really matter for most, but for me, the ride feels more personal and free in the back. So if you're socially awkward, ride solo in the back. And when on coasters with no seat dividers, like Big Thunder Mountain at various Disney parks, you can slide around side to side with the lateral forces freely with no one to judge you. Now you can't make up your mind, eh? The front has the better visuals, but the back has the better forces. Well, there is one more side of the tale you should hear before you make up your mind. The middle rows are looked down upon by enthusiasts, as they usually have the weakest forces. That is true, but on some inversions, like vertical loops, the middle rows get hang time as they spend the most time upside down, especially circular loops, like the ones on Copperhead Strike at Carowinds in Charlotte, North Carolina. But this is the only real benefit to the middle rows. If you're just getting into more intense coasters, and you want a more tame ride experience, the middle is for you. That will get you more company to the forces so you can eventually venture into the more intense front rows and especially the back rows. So, we've determined that if you want an unobstructed view, good sense of speed, and the wind in your face, the front is the way to go. We've also determined that the back is the most intense row with the best positive and negative G-forces. And lastly, the middle rows are the weakest for a more tame ride experience, with a little hang time thrown in. But on some coasters, sitting on the right or left side of the train can make or break a specific element. For example, sideways airtime hills are more pronounced on the side of the train that is higher up on the apex of the hill. The ending hill on Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg is more forceful on the left side, and also on Mako at SeaWorld Orlando, on some of the twists in the second half, the right side of the train gets thrown around more than the other rows. This isn't as impactful as which row you sit in, but if you want the most out of a specific element, then choose left or right wisely. So, in short, the best row on a coaster heavily depends on what experience you want. There is no definitive quote-unquote best row on a coaster, and everyone can have their own opinion on their favorite. And that is what is so fun about rewriting coasters, to find the best row. So, that's gonna do it for this video. If you enjoyed, I would appreciate a like or even a sub, that'd be pretty cool. And thanks for making it all the way through the video, I really appreciate it. And if you would like to share your favorite row, type it down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.